Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us today for this special episode of the Jason's Take On. Today, we're very excited to have special guest Lawton Ursrey from User IQ. We're going to be talking about accelerating customer adoption. So we're really excited to be here. As you know, as part of the Jason's Take On, we always look at a variety of different topics related to customer success, and a lot of it stems around user adoption as well. And we try to encourage people to be bold and take new approaches and think differently to how they approach customer success and working with customers. So we're really excited to have our guest here. Before I jump in, Jason, do you want to say a quick hello as well?
Yeah, hello everyone. Really excited to do another one of these guest podcasts. Really great fun to do these, getting some real life insights and experiences from experts out there in the field. And as Jason said, really good that Lawton's going to share with us kind of his own insights and the work that him and the team have done, and how that they've helped their customers there. And Lawton, I'll kind of hand over to you, let you do an introduction before we kick off. But as Jason said, what we're going to do is kind of go through our last podcast was all around accelerating user and customer adoption. So we're going to talk through some of the questions that we had there and just get your spin in it. So Lawton, I'll let you do a quick intro.
Sure. Thanks. I appreciate it. And thanks for having me here. And I'm looking forward to the discussion. So I'm the VP of Customer Success for User IQ. And to your point, Jason, focusing on accelerating user adoption, that's really at the heart of what User IQ is focused on. So our platform works with any SaaS application, and it really focuses on kind of three main things. We give customer success teams the ability to understand their users through the scripts that are installed on your SaaS application. So you can understand health scores and really user adoptions to understand at a high level or a very intricate level, how are users engaging and where are they engaging in your application. And then at that point, users always don't do what you'd like them to do. So there's also an engagement area of our solution that allows you to deploy campaigns, to get feedback from customers, to capture VOC, to inform them of new features that you've launched, NPS. So there's a series of ways that you can engage inside of your application through our engagement area of User IQ. And then, of course, the third piece is anticipating what users are going to do. Through the metrics that we're capturing on usage, there's some very, very key ways that we can inform and empower CS teams to drive smart outreach, to drive outreach at a more proactive level versus a reactive level when things are kind of too late and it's really too close to the churn milestone, if you will.
I really like that idea of that kind of proactive outreach and that engagement. I mean, that adoption and that onboarding is kind of your first stage in the journey, a really critical stage, but there's a lot that is ongoing. And I'd like to kind of throw the first question that we've got back at you, Lawton. I mean, what does adoption mean? So how do you see adoption?
Client needs fulfilled, that is at the simplest level, and understanding how to map to those with the operational alignment, the team that you're empowered with, and really the whole ensemble of tools that are available to you. But all of those things need to be really focused on, did the client need get fulfilled? And in terms of, okay, so if we understand what the client needs are, what do we do at that point? And we really kind of focus first on creating a laser focus around, if they're a client, well, they purchased, and likely they purchased for something, right? So let's laser focus on that thing and understand, are we dealing in a short-term or a long-term goal? If it's a short-term, it's a do-it-now item, and we really wrap all the energy around creating that win for them. And then we kind of focus, secondly, while that's going on, hitting that quick win, understanding what the future goals look like, and creating a timeline that ultimately means meeting those needs. And most times meeting the need is we've launched something in market with the customer, be it an NPS campaign, a in-app announcement about a new feature, a VOC customer survey, whatever those series of things are. We've kind of put those in an order that can set some clarity on how we drive a direct line to that going into market. So that's kind of the longer term pieces. And then, of course, among the goals that they're trying to achieve, we do know among our client base, there are some things across all CS teams that maybe it's not an immediate goal of why they purchase, but we know that we can create value for their teams. And here's one good example. We're able to send alerts to a CSM if there are some signals of engagement falling off. One simple one that we like to do for all clients is if login frequency drops, oftentimes we'll start within a week or a 14-day period. And if it crosses that, we set thresholds for clients. And then at that point, User IQ will fire an alert to the CSM that owns the account via Slack. And it really just informs them of, you might want to connect or maybe create some investigation around this because it appears that the customer is not engaged as they were once before. So that's an example of the quick wins, and we try to sprinkle in those that we know have excited other clients, and then we focus on the other main goals, which is why they purchased.
Yeah, and I like that, what is the reason they purchased and that laser focus on their business outcome. But it sounds like you do a nice job of mixing in, we understand their business goal, but then also, are they using the product and how can we take action if they're not using it, they're not adopting it, and making sure that we focus there. In terms of achieving user adoption, what are some of the things, not just specific to User IQ, but sort of across any SaaS vendor that you've seen are some good practices that they should be doing to help customers better adopt a SaaS product? What are some of the essential things on that journey?
Sure. Yeah, I think, it starts first and foremost back to kind of the definition of the adoption is a really clear understanding of what the client goal is. And, if that's captured, does the team seeking to accomplish that goal have a good agreement across the group of the best way to achieve that? I mean, a lot of times hitting a goal, there's a lot of different ways you can do it. It is good to have a collaborative team where people are discussing the wins and the fails and have a open sanctuary where ideas are shared together, and have some consensus across the group of this has led to increased outcomes among our user base together. So let's see if this is an area we want to create a repeatable pattern down. So that alignment on how teams achieve the goal that they've identified for the customer, I think is really important. Along that, achieving the user adoption is important all the time to celebrate. This can never be, it's not work. This is fun things. We're cracking the code on user adoption for customer success teams and empowering outreach. I mean, these are new things that we're helping teams accomplish. That's fun. And I think that a lot of people in pursuit of the business goal can sometimes miss these little things that are super important. So celebrating is a big one for our team. And I think it's important for all teams. A complete understanding of the customer journey along the user adoption pathway is really important. If you understand that, then you can more closely coordinate your touch points, right? So you've got potentially a CSM team interacting with a client. You've got maybe a drip nurture email that is sending communication to them. You've perhaps got in-app messaging. And there's this whole ecosystem that should be almost perfectly aligned to what the customer goal is intended to do. That stuff is very complex, and it's really I see this step skipped often. People are not oftentimes mapping what's happening at the front stage and in the back stage, what is happening inside the application for the user, outside the application, the touch points from a human touch point to your digital touch points. The coordination of that, it has to be understood, and it has to be understood by every team member of what is happening when, to create that proper coordination.
When you say front stage and backstage, can you just clarify what you mean by that? Because I'm not sure everyone is familiar with that.
Yeah, sure. Sorry about that. So front stage is really the what is seen and felt by the customer. So that's really just front stage means the optics of the customer experience. Backstage means some of the additional details of how the front stage presentation is created and the front stage experience is created. And within all of those, the front stage, there's a series of touch points, a call, an email. There's also some things that I often see missed is an invisible touch point. And there's visible touch points, that's what the customer sees, like an email. An invisible touch point, as you're looking at customer experience, could be the time at which a customer waits for something via email, inside your application, something from the CSM team. It's really important to remember touch points can be visible and invisible from a timing perspective. And timing is really key from a customer experience standpoint.
Cool. Thank you for clarifying. I don't often hear people talk about invisible touch points. That's an interesting idea.
Do you want one other question for you, Lawton? It's something that I think we kind of spoke about before we kick this off, but how do you position adoption, onboarding, and kind of the whole success around it during the sales process? Do you get your CSM teams engaged with the sales process? Do your sales team position adoption and onboarding at the correct level? How are the expectations set there with customers?
Sure. Yeah, I think the key word there for us is restraint. There's a lot of exciting things that benefit customer success teams with our tool, and a lot of cool things from cracking the code on user adoption. You have to be really careful with that. So we really practice restraint in that sales process, focusing similar to what I've said before from a user adoption standpoint. What is if they purchase, what is the reason they're going to purchase for? And let's illuminate how to create that and make sure we draw a direct line that from a customer experience standpoint is easy to get there, and the client really has comprehension of how to meet the requirements that they have. Right? Authenticity, that's another one that we focus heavily on, and for us, the authenticity means through the lens of the customer that we serve, the things that we talk about are not necessarily there from a sales perspective. We're talking about how our own team uses our tool, and we're talking about stories from the field, how our own customers and the customer success teams, how they individually use their tool. So we really try hard to make sure the whole team knows our customers better even than our own CS team internally knows it, and that they're empowered with stories that are ways that the application is empowering teams. That keeps us focused on a learning and a comprehension model that I think leads to increased sales, and it's a no BS model. If we can't talk about a story of how our team is using it or a customer is using it, don't talk about it, and that keeps us focused on the why behind what our tool is doing.
Very cool. I think that's so important too. I love what you said up front about the whole restraint and keeping focused on intended adoption, because I think we found that a lot of clients they really want the outcome and they see the tool can deliver this, but they don't understand there's stuff that they need to do once they get the tool to really drive that outcome, and to make that happen. So it's so important to have that. So, and I think your point of story is incredibly powerful to see more and more people telling customers stories during the sales process and beyond. Here's the things that happen that are good, and here are things that are happening bad if you do the stuff that needs to go down.
Yeah, and one thing I'll add to that is it's similar to what I said earlier about celebrate, making sure along this path in pursuit of goals that some of these small things that matter and do have they have a big lever on affecting the adoption that you want. Mm-hmm. Making sure that the sales team and the CS team at consistent intervals until, and this is for us is the mark of when we can stop. When sales knows more about CS than our CS team does, that's kind of an indicator of, hey, great, we did a good job cross-collaborating to make sure that we understand each other. Pause has to happen among these departments, and there has to be some coming together consistently to really just talk about the stories, how people are finding value in our tool, and sales can pick up on these stories, and it just makes for better conversations with prospects in the sales process.
Sure. No, that's interesting because so many organizations struggle with the sales and CS alignment, and it sounds like you guys have really hit some things there.
It's something that you see come up so many times, and there's a lot of posts and articles that have been written about it very recently about it, with just that alignment or gaps between them, and they're often seen as two very different and sometimes competing organizations. And I really, we've talked about it before, Jason, but the sooner you involve your CS team in the sales cycle, particularly for your big enterprise deals, the better you can start introducing them. You can start kind of bringing reality to kind of case studies. You bring advocacy to life and things. And I think actually setting expectations for what customers need to do on their side when it comes to onboarding, and how critical it is so important to do, but quite often missed and a challenge.
Absolutely. I think it's really important. Lawton, sort of trying to get a little practical here for a second. What methods do you and your team use to actually reduce time to value for your customers and help them get that quick adoption and quick win so that they can see that, yes, we're achieving our outcomes? What have you found most effective in that area?
Sure. I mean, my number one is you having a team that is completely fulfilled in clients achieving goals, and just finds sheer enjoyment partnering with the champion or the admin that is their main contact, and making them look like a rock star. So that the excitement and fulfillment around the individuals creating value for clients is critical, if not the number one. And then the second one, I think, is understanding that the progression towards achieving a client goal can oftentimes be nonlinear. There may be a more important, a big goal that you're focused on. The timeline may be too long. So it's making sure that while we're achieving this larger one, that we're getting quick wins and immediate value on that journey with them. So understanding how to progress in a nonlinear way and knock some things out that would count as a win for the client. Motivation, similar to what I said earlier, celebrate. Using motivation and positive reinforcement has been very effective for us for shortening time to value. Here's an example. There's certain areas in our application when the user does it, let's say they launch a campaign for the first time. We have these emails that go out, they're called high five emails, and it just says, hey, you launched your first campaign, nice work. That didn't have to come from in an unsustainable way, straight from the CS member that owns it. I mean, we can't do that for every customer, but we're using that automated way to indicate to the user, you're on the right path, and we're using positive reinforcement to let the user know that. The other thing that's key for reducing time to value for us is an understanding of the phases of customer journey. So you're in the onboarding phase. After onboarding, you get an adoption pro badge, and then you're in the adoption phase. And then from there, you're in the engagement phase. All of these are time boxed, and they're it's not a perfect science, but time boxing allows us to say, of all of our customers, what's the time frame that we have seen them leave onboarding, and then the adoption phase also has time boxing. There are extremities in these time frames, and if a customer is not out of onboarding in 30 days, and we're in, let's say, a 90-day period, something's clearly wrong. So making sure that the team understands these phases and that there is a progression over time. Understanding that there will be outliers, and sometimes there's a sprint, and sometimes maybe a product is sunsetted, things like that. The other thing that's really critical for us is when a good relationship is in place, accountability is much easier, and that to me is probably another big lever for getting to time to value quickly. You've got to manage the client towards their goals. If you understand the goals and there's good partnership there, they understand that you're going to get them to that goal, even if you have to drag them across the finish line. Clients respond well to that, not when things are going wrong, but if you establish that expectation early and say, I'm not going to sell for anything less than you being a rock star and being successful. Setting the tone with clear action items, letting them know every interaction that we are focused on that goal and we're going to manage to that. Setting expectations in the way that we work together and the way that we're not going to work together. We've got plenty of examples of things that derailed, and we upfront established that these are things we're not going to do as a team along this journey. And lastly, I think another important thing is having the hard conversation and not waiting on it. Here, one example would be, if you're doing the right job all across the board, you'll be able to see and feel when things are off track. Oftentimes I see teams letting things linger a bit too long because there needs to be an escalation, or you need to align the champion and the sponsor and all of that. Not waiting to have that hard conversation, to really just politely say, we're slightly off trajectory to hit your goals. And as I said, when we first started working together, I'm going to make sure we hit the goals, and creating that alignment, not weeks and months later when it's really kind of a lot of wasted time there.
That alignment piece, I was going to say, that alignment piece is super important and really difficult to get right.
Yep. And I think I agree a lot with
a lot
what
of
you
our
said around.
team struggles with it.
Yeah. A lot of the clients I work with, they struggle with, really how to establish that relationship in a proactive way and to be learning to be comfortable having those hard conversations. Because I think in many times they're new to that role, but they also feel like it's difficult. They shouldn't be asking the client for their time or asking the client to do things. And I think you need to switch that mindset pretty quickly to get folks to say, oh, no, if I'm doing my clients a disservice if I'm not clear and if I'm not direct with them, I'm making their job harder.
Completely agree. And I can say, on my side as well, like it is, there's sometimes resistance to those conversations. You just have to encourage yourself to just have the hard conversation, get past it. There's always too much worry up front of how it will go. And if you're going to screw things up, it's just better to put the elephant in the room, have the conversation. After it's over, there's this really great blooming effect, and suddenly adoption gets much easier. And I think that it's important for people to realize the timeline and the history of when that conversation happens and you get that alignment. Cut it in half. I think that would be an actionable thing to remember, is have the hard conversation and have it in half the time that you have before.
I really like that. And I've seen many examples of where there's a lot of resistance to having that conversation, and it just keeps getting pushed back and back and back. But when you do it, it's never, once you've had it and you've gone over the initial kind of challenging part of the conversation, it's never that bad an issue. And I love the kind of point you talked there about it. It always just feels better once you've done it. There's kind of just this thing's been lifted and the conversation changes. Do you, Lawton, that kind of brings us on neatly to kind of one of the last questions, but there's something that Jason and I talked about at length on our podcast, because again, there are so many things you can do right, but there are also a lot of things that can go wrong with adoption. What are some of the things that you've seen that can derail adoption and things that you should avoid doing?
Sure. And apologies if some of this is repetitive, but going back to the clearly stating to the customer that I'm your partner, and as your partner, we are going to hit goals, and I'm going to shorten that timeline to that goal in the best way possible and make you look amazing in that process. Stating that early means that you've got a handshake if alignment gets off and you need to get things cinched back up. You stated up front that you were going to do these things if these things happen in the future. And that way it can reduce some of the disagreements. And I think it also up front stating that in the proper way and being really direct with that, being polite with it as well. You're creating accountability in a conversation. There's no project yet. There's no action items. There's really nothing established, but you're letting the partner that you're going to hit the goals with know this is the path that we're going to get on, and it's one of the quickest ways to create that accountability before things start to get derailed. Another one in terms of derailing, making the client drink from a fire hose. I see this so often, and it's really easy to get sucked into that. The individuals working with a client in the solution, oftentimes we all do this. Oftentimes, something that appears to be easy to you. We always say internally in our team, we're compromised. We're compromised in terms of the application is too easy. We understand exactly how to use it. So we have to practice that restraint, and we have to use that keyword in that phrase, don't drink from a fire hose. And we say that often to keep us safe as we're interacting with new users and remembering that experience has to stay that way. Button pushing. So not doing button pushing onboarding and focusing on the why onboarding. And this is another thing I see often. There's the button pushing, and that's easy. That's easy to go through and show people, here's how you can do this and that, and it's so easy and it's great. You lose people so quickly. The comprehension just evaporates. And that's similar to drinking from a fire hose. It's drinking from a fire hose is kind of showing too much. The button pushing piece is showing how you push the buttons and not creating a kind of a mental model for that comprehension. And that comes back to the why. Why do they care about this area that we're speaking about and training them on? And the why, the way in which we speak to it, the best way to do it for us is speak to the why in unique ways that is unique to them. If you know their application, you can speak to certain ways that our application and it creates that why. So, and that's the hardest way to do it. There is a general why you would do something, but then there's the why through the optics of the customer's application. That's very powerful. The next one for me would be weak project management. So much stuff with so many things we have to do professionally comes down to disconnects and just poor management of the timeline to achieve an adoption. So that one, I think people can always get better at it and work on. Another one would be pinpointing trajectory misalignment. If you understand the customer journey, understand what's going on, you will be able to spot when the trajectory is off, false starts, things that are just making it a bit too hard, onboarding maybe taking too long, adoption phase too long. At that point, trajectory misalignment, that's when oftentimes we'll get a dev to dev conversation happening. Maybe there's some technical things that are just slowing progress down. Getting the people aligned, getting them in a room and walking out of there with agreement and who's going to do what next so we can go ahead and start hitting the goal again. I think another one would be don't let the client manage you. There's multiple versions of that. And I think the last one would be if you're awake to this partnership and the client, you'll be able to see and feel, is the priority at that organization truly set in the right way it needs to be to hit the goal, or is it weaker than we had believed to be? And that really comes down to, are there meeting pushes too often? So after three meeting pushes, sometimes people are busy, right? And that's easy for it to happen. Priorities get ahead of that. So if those are happening, and we do know that the champion and the sponsor have stated that it's a priority at the company, there just might be some miscommunication on the person doing the work and what the priority actually is if there's some misses. So just making sure that among all the things happening, is the right priority at this organization set to create an adoption outcome? And if not, it will really derail adoption.
I think that's so true, and I've seen that a lot where, if you don't understand right up front where this falls relative to the priorities, and if you really have that, executive commitment and support, and, we could talk another time about my loathing of the word buy-in, because I think it doesn't really demonstrate the commitment and support, but it's all right there, and then you get all the problems you just mentioned. So I think that's a really good tactical list that people like. And just to close out in the interest of time here, how do you actually go about measuring customer adoption, and what have you found most effective and most useful to you? Because there's a lot of things, a lot of metrics that are possible, but trying to figure out the ones that actually are meaningful and impactful, that's often a challenge for folks.
Sure. Yeah. So for us internally, we have this thing that we call intended versus actual. So intended really is the word that sticks to why did they buy it? Why did they give our company money? What is it? It's usually not all of the 30,000 things that we can do, but it's usually 2 or 3 key things. And that would be called for us, that's intended adoption. So we know what that is when someone purchases our solution, and we make sure that there's a good handoff from the sales team to CS, and they empower us with, what is it that they need to accomplish. So now we've got intended captured. Then over time through that journey we don't measure this in the first 2 days because that's too quick, but as time goes on in the first week, first 2 weeks, first 3 weeks, we start to look and say, is there an alignment between intended, why they wanted to purchase or why they purchased, and actual, what real metrics of usage are there, and is there alignment? And that makes it really simple. Intended and actual, are they aligned? Are they not? And that's the one that we're constantly focusing on every part of the customer lifecycle. The other one is we may see actual adoption is aligned to intended. Then there's another level we apply to that and say, okay, great, that's great. How much of that adoption that was why they purchased is active adoption? And that would mean for us, active campaigns. Is there a in-app feature announcement driving users to a new feature? Is there an NPS campaign they've launched, a custom survey, a rating survey? All these things that have to be in an active state, which means customers have deployed this to their user base live. That's a higher level of adoption for us. And the other one, that a lot of people measure, login count and login frequency. If someone's logging in once a week and suddenly they're disappeared for 3 weeks, something's off there. And it doesn't mean that it's an emergency and it's going to lead to imminent churn, but we empower the CSMs with the information, and we've aligned as a team that this is not what we would deem on a good path to adoption. And maybe it's just a check-in, maybe it's an email or two, things like that. So we just empower them with those metrics. The other one is measuring adoption, understanding time and events. So events would be creation of thing and activating it and driving it to their customer base. The time frame of that would be in these phases, onboarding, adoption, and engagement, or in that time frame are we achieving those things? So that would mean we're achieving active adoption early. And sometimes we'll see it in the onboarding phase. People are launching things into their user base. Measuring it also, we look at is the client engaged with the CSM? Is there an actual partnership there or not? Now that's not a direct metric, but we do have a checkbox where the CSM can indicate to us client is engaged or not engaged. The other key thing for measuring adoption, I think it's the main point I'd want to make here with this question is you've got to have a variety of adoption measurements, or what you're doing might not be reliable. Help scores on their own, not reliable. NPS on its own, not reliable. CSAT, onboarding ratings for CSMs. There's a whole mix of things. It's important to create a multi-channel way of measuring that adoption, because if you looked at, let's say, active adoption, that's not enough. There may be some things that are going off the rails and it's in the NPS comment, or it's something in the service model in CSAT, or it could be something in our onboarding rating that someone gets when they complete onboarding that says we maybe had a miss from a CSM perspective. So having a multi-channel capture of adoption really ensures that the steps you take after you're informed with the metrics are the right ones. And oftentimes I'll see people relying way too heavily on one or two things, and then that's gospel, and it drives so much work and so much outreach, and sometimes it's not proven out, and it causes a gyrating effect. So where we do this and then now let's do that, and this was wrong. And so yeah, I think the main point would just be a multi-channel capture of these metrics.
Wow. I really like that, how well you've thought through and really broken down adoption from, active adoption, intended versus actual, having those multiple channel metrics around it and looking across the spectrum of those. Because when we talk with a lot of organizations, they either haven't really thought through what adoption means or how to measure it, or it's like, oh, we have logins or we had a few records created, but they aren't really drilling down to the level that you are. Are they putting the right campaigns at the right time? Are they doing the right things in the right phases? To really get a sense of, are they on the path to really getting full value from the application? And I think it's great that you've spent so much time in that, and that I think more and more organizations need to get that level of where you are. So thank you for sharing those insights.
Sure.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So Lawton, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate your time and your insights. I know you guys at UserIQ have done some great things, and encourage everyone, if they have questions about what we've been discussed, to reach out to you directly. Obviously we'll put some links into your LinkedIn profile and things like that in the description. But really excited to have you join us today. So thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you as well. I'm honored to be a part of it, and really enjoyed the session with you guys. Thanks again.
Great. Thanks so much. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.